The annual clinical research grant pool totaled $41 million, and my wife's former college classmate took $5 million. As the Chief Principal Investigator PI responsible for 87% of the clinical trial's surgical successes and FDA approvals, I only received a $10,000 commemorative effort award. The moment I submitted my resignation from the project, the CEO's wife chased after me, tapped me on the shoulder, and said the hospital's underground morgue just so happened to need a night shift record keeper. With one sentence from me, her face instantly turned as dark as a necrotic tissue sample. At Aegis Healthcare Group's annual gala that night, the $41 million National Artificial Heart Project incentive pool was displayed on the massive LED screen. The applause nearly brought down the crystal chandeliers in the hotel's banquet hall. I sat in the last row, still wearing my scrubs under a hastily thrown-on jacket, fresh from a 14-hour emergency bypass surgery. I was holding a post-op clinical review report, my hands still smelling faintly of sterile scrub and antiseptic. The first page of the report stated in black and white the 3 major clinical milestones of the year: an 87% patient survival and recovery rate in Phase 2, seamless FDA site coordination, on-site surgical troubleshooting, and final protocol delivery. All were explicitly led by the project's chief clinical investigator and lead cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Ethan Hayes. But when the host read my name, he deliberately paused.
Clinical Trial Office, Dr.
Ethan Hayes. Annual Collaboration Commemorative Award, $10,000 prize. The entire venue fell silent for a fraction of a second. The next moment, someone let out a low, mocking chuckle. I looked up and saw my name at the very bottom of the list on the big screen. But beside it, there was no core lead, no trial director, no key surgeon, just a flimsy collaborator. And on stage, the person walking away with the $5 million bonus was Ryan Cole. He was an old college classmate of my wife, Olivia Hart, and had been parachuted in by her just 3 months ago as the Vice President of Medical Strategy at Aegis Healthcare. Aegis is a top-tier private medical network that started by building specialized surgical centers and advanced clinical research platforms. Olivia is the CEO and also my wife. Everyone in the hospital knows we've been married for 8 years, but in corporate boardrooms and clinical project settings, she never lets me mention this relationship. She always said she didn't want the medical board to think she relied on her husband's surgical reputation to secure national research grants. She said that as a lead surgeon, I should be even more mindful of avoiding any appearance of a conflict of interest. She said I had to let my scalpel and my clinical results speak for themselves. I believed her. So, over the past few years, I never used my identity as her husband to pressure anyone in hospital meetings. I only acted according to medical ethics, FDA regulations, and clinical protocols. I led my surgical team through grueling 36-hour shifts. I crouched in the ICU at 3:00 in the morning to troubleshoot artificial heart pump failures when the vendor's tech support wasn't answering. I waited for the National Health Board supervisor for 5 hours at the state capitol, just to secure one opportunity for a clinical data demonstration. I endured 27 straight days in the lab testing the biocompatibility of the valves. I revised a clinical protocol that Ryan couldn't even understand until it passed the stringent FDA ethical review. Finally, the project succeeded. A $41 million incentive pool came down.
Ryan took $5 million.
I took $100.
Ryan stood on stage in a tailored white suit, holding a glass of champagne, smiling warmly and gracefully. Thank you, Olivia, for your absolute trust, and thank you to all the clinical staff for your cooperation. Without everyone, I couldn't have secured this grant alone. When he said everyone, his gaze fell on me in the back row as if offering charity to a beggar. Several hospital executives nearby immediately applauded. Vice President Cole is being too modest. The Sequoia Artificial Heart Project wouldn't have been secured without your brilliant investor relations.
Dr.
Hayes has worked hard too, visiting the wards quite frequently. Visiting the wards. They glossed over my 3 consecutive months of microscopic surgeries, the FDA ethical clearance I secured using my own medical license as collateral, and the $37 million in funding I pulled back from the brink of default when the initial trials stalled. They dismissed it all as merely visiting the wards. I looked down at the untouched water glass on my table.
Grace Miller, the director of medical compliance sitting next to me, lowered her voice.
Ethan, this isn't right. Just bear with it for tonight and talk to Olivia later. I smiled a tired, hollow smile. Already talked 3 days ago. I had placed the bonus allocation proposal on Olivia's mahogany desk and asked her why the principal investigator titles for the 3 main trials, Sequoia Artificial Heart, Coastal Targeted Gene Therapy, and the Blue Ridge Pediatric Oncology Center, had all been changed to Ryan Cole. She didn't even look up from her iPad, just said one sentence. Ethan, as a doctor, you shouldn't always focus on the money. I had replied, this isn't about money. It's about medical facts and legal attribution. She finally looked up, her perfectly manicured eyebrows furrowing at me. The fact is, you're too rigid, too much of an academic surgeon, and not suited for the commercial healthcare front. Ryan knows how to handle medical investors and maintain VIP client relationships. For the hospital network to grow, it can't always rely on you alone at the operating table. I asked her, so, the clinical miracles I've achieved with my own hands can be credited to him? Olivia's expression had turned cold.
Do you have to be so particular about this?
We're husband and wife. If the hospital group does well, doesn't that mean you do well too?
At that moment, I said nothing more. I simply took a photo of the contingency plan, turned around, and left her office. Tonight, I sit in the last row of the banquet hall, watching her turn those words into reality on the stage. Ryan suddenly raised his glass and turned to Olivia.
Actually, the person I should thank the most is Olivia.
She held off the board's pressure and let me take charge of the Sequoia clinical trial. Without her vision, I wouldn't have had the chance to prove myself. The applause from the audience grew deafening. Olivia stood up, her evening gown shimmering, and lightly clinked her glass against his. The spotlight fell on them, making them look like two visionaries truly fighting side by side. Someone eager to watch the drama unfold turned and called out to me. Doctor,
Hayes, why don't you toast VP Cole as well?
you'll need to learn more about modern healthcare business thinking from him in the future. I looked up. The speaker was the marketing director, Mark Benson. He usually calls me chief whenever he needs me to save a VIP patient. But now he was the quickest to change his tune to please the new favorite. I didn't raise my glass.
I only asked one question.
Learn what from him?
How to forge clinical contributions? Mark was stunned. Ryan walked over with a practiced gentle smile and handed a wine glass toward me. Ethan, I know you're feeling a bit burnt out, but the board's allocation has its own considerations.
You've always been in the OR, and everyone can see your hard work.
I looked at him, my voice flat. What exactly are you toasting me for? His smile stiffened slightly. The surroundings gradually quieted down, as people sensed the shifting atmosphere. I stood up, pressing my phone face down in my palm. You want me to run the clinical trials for you? Revise the FDA protocols for you?
Shoulder the legal risk of patient mortality for you, and in the end, take the $5 million for you?
The banquet hall fell completely, agonizingly silent.
Olivia's face darkened.
Ethan Hayes, she called me by my full name. In the operating room, when the lead surgeon calls your full name, it's a life or death command. In marriage, when your wife calls your full name, it's a final warning. Ryan quickly returned to being the gentle peacemaker.
You misunderstood.
Medical research is a team effort and does not belong to any one individual. I nodded slowly.
I see.
So, the team bonus is $12 million. The CEO's special contribution is $6 million. Ryan's personal strategic bonus is $5 million. And the actual chief medical investigator, who held the scalpel and wrote the code for the monitor, gets $10. I looked at the big screen. This executive team really knows how to dissect a corpse. Some people looked down. Others pretended to drink water. Olivia walked down from the head table, her high heels pressing into the thick carpet. The sound was soft, yet no one in the room dared to move. She stood in front of me and lowered her voice to a furious hiss. Have you had enough of this? I looked into her eyes I used to find comfort in after long shifts. I'm just trying to clarify the clinical data. Her eyes turned cold.
What kind of occasion is this?
You have to embarrass me in front of the entire industry?
I laughed.
A short, sharp sound.
I did.
You see, when I was being humiliated on that screen, she didn't say a word. Ryan quickly stepped in to smooth things over. Olivia, forget it. Ethan has been trapped in the lab all year. It's normal for him to have emotional fatigue. The gentler and more understanding he acted, the more I felt painted as the unstable, bitter workaholic who didn't understand the bigger picture. I lowered my head, pulled a crisp application form from my file folder, and slapped it onto the linen tablecloth. Since the hospital board and the project team all think my medical license and surgical expertise are only worth $1,000, then I quit as the principal investigator. Gasps echoed all around. Mark blurted out, Ethan, are you crazy? If you submit a withdrawal request now, what about Sequoia Phase 2?
What about the Blue Ridge pediatric trials?
I pushed the application form toward Olivia. Medical handover will follow the standard FDA procedure. Documents belonging to the clinical office will remain. I will transfer all patented algorithms under my personal medical authorization and my personal clinical data I will take with me. Olivia stared at the application form, her expression finally cracking.
Are you threatening me?
It's not a threat. I put down my water glass. It's a medical notice. I turned and left the table. Behind me, I could hear whispers cutting through the silence. He really thinks he's irreplaceable. Where can a surgeon go without a Aegis funding? With just one word from Olivia, who in the private healthcare circle would dare let him near an operating table?
I didn't look back.
When I reached the entrance of the banquet hall, my phone buzzed.
Grace sent me 2 images.
Image 1.
A bonus approval form?
Image 2.
An internal memo regarding a $5 million bonus. Note:
core contributor to the Sequoia project.
replace the original principal investigator, Dr. Ethan Hayes, to complete key investor coordination. I stared at the word replace for a few seconds, then replied, backup. Grace replied instantly, already backed up. There is something even more drastic.
Come out to the parking lot and it'll tell you.
I had just put away my phone when Olivia's voice came from behind me. Ethan, stop. I stopped. She caught up to me at the grand double doors, her face still carrying the chill from the banquet hall. Go back right now, withdraw the application, and I can pretend nothing happened tonight.
I looked at her.
What about the $10,000?
Her brow furrowed with deep irritation. You're still hung up on this trivial amount? I didn't answer. She took a deep breath, as if actively suppressing her patience for a difficult child. The hospital's underground archive and morgue just happens to be short a night shift record keeper. If you really feel wronged and need a break from the OR, I'll have HR arrange that easy position for you tomorrow, so you won't keep thinking the hospital is overworking you. When these words fell, several executives smoking at the door all heard them. Someone couldn't help but stifle a laugh. Ryan, who had followed her out, stood behind her and said in a low, pitying voice, Olivia, don't say that. Ethan will feel bad. I looked at Olivia for a full 3 seconds. The woman I had mortgaged my deceased parents' house for to fund her first clinic. Then I laughed.
The morgue is indeed short of people, I said, tucking my hospital ID badge into my inner pocket.
But what's lacking isn't a night shift keeper.
It's someone who can still keep the FDA inspectors from shutting down Aegis next month. The color instantly drained from Olivia's face. Ryan finally stopped smiling. I turned and walked to the elevator. The moment before the stainless steel doors closed, I saw Olivia's fingers clenched so tightly her knuckles were stark white. My phone vibrated again. Grace sent another message. The FDA ethical authorization for the Sequoia trial's core experimental lab expires in 12 days. The renewal approval authority lies solely with the principal investigator and the National Health Board. I turned off the screen.
6 years.
They had finally forgotten the real reason Aegis Medical Center was allowed to host a national-level clinical trial in the first place. Securing the low-cost usage rights to the state's decommissioned research labs and bringing experimental treatments to Aegis was never because of Ryan's tailored suits or Olivia's networking wine glasses. It was because of my spotless clinical credibility. It was because of my compliance applications, one after another. It was my medical risk guarantees time and again, and my personal FDA authorization letters. Now it was time to take it all back. The lights in the underground parking lot were a sterile, cold white. My aging SUV was parked in the farthest corner. It had been driven for 7 years, the interior smelling faintly of stale coffee from countless late-night hospital runs. Olivia always complained it wasn't dignified enough for a CEO's husband. Yet, within 3 months of Ryan joining the company, he was leased a luxury sports car worth hundreds of thousands on the hospital's dime. I had just unlocked the car when Grace walked over quickly from the shadows of a concrete pillar. She placed her laptop bag on the hood of my car, her expression tense.
Ethan, did Olivia understand what you just said?
I nodded.
Of course she understood.
The clinical authorization, the temporary research lab at the state facility, was Aegis' first golden ticket into top-tier medical research. 6 years ago, Aegis' funding chain broke, and they couldn't even afford the liability insurance for the surgical center. Olivia had sat on the floor of my apartment, crying, saying her dream was about to go under. I used my own medical reputation to vouch for her, helping her secure the state lab at a fraction of the cost, and mortgaged the old house my father left me to cover her first batch of surgical robotic equipment. Later, Aegis grew into a behemoth. Olivia felt that our connection might invite gossip from the medical board, so she asked me to hide it.
I agreed.
But not mentioning it doesn't mean the foundation doesn't exist. Grace opened her computer, the screen illuminating her serious face. There is a massive problem with tonight's bonus approval, and it's not just your $1,000 insult. She opened a spreadsheet. In the original calculations for the Sequoia project, your PI coordination bonus, surgical risk compensation, and patent royalties should have been $4.8 million. Olivia personally approved the revisions 3 times. Grace pointed to the timestamps. The first time, she changed it to $1.2 million. The second time to $30,000. And finally, she settled on $1,000. The last modification was made just 2 hours before tonight's banquet. Approved by Olivia Hart. I looked at the notes section.
Note, Doctor.
Ethan Hayes has too strong an academic clinical style, posing commercial management risks, and is not suitable for high-tier financial incentives. I let out a dry laugh.
Clinical style is too strong?
Since when is saving lives a commercial risk?
Grace's voice grew even lower.
There's also an attachment provided by Ryan.
He stated that during the Sequoia Phase 2 acceptance phase, you unilaterally changed the patient medication dosage, causing the FDA to almost flag Aegis, which is why your bonus was severely deducted as a penalty. I looked up sharply. Sequoia's Phase 2 review had 0 complaints. On the contrary, my surgical adjustments raised the actual patient survival rate from 83% to 96%. As for the dosage change, Ryan made reckless promises to venture capitalists about early patient discharge at a reception and ordered the nurses to alter the IV flow rate to speed up recovery times. It nearly triggered a lethal cardiac event. I worked through the night in emergency surgery to patch up his mess and drafted a 50-page medical risk assessment to hide his incompetence from the board. Grace pushed the chat logs toward me, captured from the hospital's secure server backend. Hes pinning that near-fatal incident entirely on you. On the screen were Ryan's exact words to Olivia. Ethan has the surgical skills, but has too much of a battlefield doctor. He treats these high-net-worth clinical trials as his personal science experiments, which is detrimental to the hospital's IPO timeline. If we don't rein him in this time, all future lucrative projects will be held hostage by his ethics. I'm not fighting over the bonus, Olivia. I'm just worried for you and the board. And Olivia's reply, I know, let's go with your plan tonight.
We need to clip his wings.
That single sentence cleanly severed 8 years of marriage. It was surgical, precise, fatal. I closed my laptop. Grace looked at me, her eyes filled with quiet fury on my behalf.
What are you going to do?
I pulled up the electronic version of my PI withdrawal request. I sent it to the National Health Board, the FDA Compliance Office, and copied the Aegis Board of Directors, the legal department, and the hospital administration. The first step. The official medical transfer takes effect. Grace was stunned for a moment.
You're really leaving?
What about Sequoia Phase 2?
The Blue Ridge pediatric upgrade?
The Coastal Genetic Labs?
I opened my car door. Follow the medical contract. Grace understood immediately. None of these projects were ordinary commercial contracts. To secure the government's approval for Aegis to conduct these trials, I had included a key investigator clause in the contracts. Any change in the project's principal investigator requires written confirmation from the FDA and the state medical board. The core clinical protocol involves my personal medical patent authorization. It must not be altered, disclosed to unauthorized commercial personnel, or used for any procedures outside my direct oversight. Olivia used to find these compliance terms incredibly troublesome. I had always told her they were meant to protect the hospital from malpractice lawsuits. Now, she would learn that what protects the hospital can also destroy it. Grace took a deep breath. Ethan, what do you want me to do? Preserve the clinical evidence. I looked at her. All approval records, bonus changes, signature alterations, chat logs, patient monitor logs showing Ryan's unauthorized IV changes and fund flows. Don't lose a single byte. She nodded.
Got it.
Just as I was about to get into the car, the sharp clicking of high heels echoed from the parking lot entrance. Olivia came running down the ramp. Ryan walked closely alongside her, accompanied by Mark and the HR director. A formidable corporate lineup. Olivia stood in front of my car, her expression grim and authoritative. Ethan, what did you mean by your little stunt just now?
I didn't beat around the bush. Literally what I said.
The FDA authorization for the Sequoia lab expires in 12 days, and I am not signing the renewal. She stared at me, aghast.
Are you out of your mind?
If the Aegis clinical team can't get into that lab, do you have any idea how many patients and investor millions will be halted? I looked back at her calmly.
You only just figured out I was crazy tonight?
She was left momentarily speechless. Ryan immediately stepped forward, playing the mature executive. Ethan, don't joke about national medical projects.
Marital quarrels are one thing, but dragging FDA clinical trials into your personal vendetta is unseemly and unethical.
I looked at him. You took my surgical results and the blood of my patients to claim $5 million, And you dare talk to me about ethics? His face changed. Mark quickly interjected. Dr. Hayes, the partnership with the state lab is a long-term commercial arrangement, not something you can just halt on a whim. Medical contracts are no joke. I nodded.
Exactly.
So, I am following the contract to the letter. I pulled out my phone and opened the authorization renewal email. 15 days before the authorization expires, both parties must confirm whether to renew. Tonight marks exactly the 15th day, and Aegis has not submitted a formal renewal application containing my signature. Nor has the hospital settled the patent maintenance fees for my proprietary AI monitoring software from last year. The HR director's face turned pale.
Wasn't the software maintenance fee deferred?
Deferred doesn't mean waived, I said, looking directly at Olivia. The supplementary agreement was personally signed by CEO Hart. Olivia's lips moved slightly.
Of course she remembered.
At the time, she wanted to ease the hospital's cash flow pressure to acquire a new plastic surgery wing and asked me not to push for my patent fees. I didn't push because she was my wife, but the legally binding agreement was always there.
She gritted her teeth.
Ethan, do you really have to take things to this extreme over a wounded ego? I asked her back, my voice dangerously soft.
Do you really think I'm the one who went too far tonight?
Her eyes slightly reddened. In the past, when she looked at me with that vulnerable expression, I would soften, apologize, and fix whatever she had broken. But not this time. Ryan stepped forward again.
Ethan, don't be impulsive.
At worst, we can ask the board to recalculate the bonus. Let's sit down in my office tomorrow and talk like gentlemen. I smiled. Return the $5 million to the hospital's research fund. Then we'll talk. His face contorted. Olivia immediately defended him. That was a board-approved disbursement, not just Ryan's personal issue to resolve. Then let's discuss it with the board, I said, opening my car door. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., I will submit 3 things to the administration. My formal withdrawal as PI, the cessation of patent authorization, and the change of project leader notification to the FDA. Olivia jerked her head up. You wouldn't dare.
I sat in the driver's seat.
Try me? The moment I pulled the door shut, she tapped frantically on the glass. Ethan, we are married. I rolled down the window and looked at the woman I had loved and bled for over 8 years. When the millions in bonuses were being handed out tonight, why didn't it occur to you that we were husband and wife? Her hand froze in midair. I rolled up the window and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, she stood completely still, her face colder than the fluorescent parking lot lights. Just as I drove up the exit ramp, my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. It was Dr. Marcus Reed, the FDA Oversight Director for the Sequoia Project.
Dr.
Hayes, I just received an automated alert that Aegis is changing the principal investigator for the Sequoia trial. I gripped the steering wheel.
I just found out tonight as well, Dr.
Reed.
Reed was silent for 2 heavy seconds. If it weren't for you holding the scalpel and running the data, Sequoia Phase 2 would be shut down immediately. You know the compliance risks better than anyone. I gazed at the dark city streets ahead. Director, send the official inquiry letter to the hospital according to protocol. He said, I've already had our legal team draft it. Check your inbox. After the call ended, the first formal correspondence landed. The subject line was brief and lethal. Risk advisory and immediate suspension warning. Change of principal investigator for Aegis Healthcare Group. I pulled over for 3 seconds, forwarded it to Olivia, the board of directors, legal, and Ryan. I added only 1 sentence to the body of the email. The first symptom has arrived. At 8:40 the next morning, I arrived at Aegis Medical Headquarters, not to scrub in for surgery, but to hand over my life's work. In the grand marble lobby, photos from last night's celebration banquet were already displayed on the digital pillars. The largest one showed Olivia and Ryan standing at the center of the stage. Her smile was elegant, his was radiant. I stood at the very edge of the group photo, only half of my face visible behind a junior nurse. It perfectly encapsulated my position over the years.
Medical staff passing by looked at me with subtle darting expressions.
Some pretended to read patient charts. Others aggressively texted on their phones. A few of Ryan's newly hired administrative sycophants deliberately raised their voices. Some doctors really think the hospital revolves around them. After throwing a tantrum like a child last night, he still showed up to clock in today.
I didn't stop.
I walked straight into the high-security clinical trial office. Someone was already rummaging through the locked cabinets at my desk. It was Ryan's new administrative assistant. When she saw me, her hand trembled, and a stack of confidential patient consent forms fell onto the desk.
Doctor
Hayes, Vice President Cole asked me to organize the Sequoia materials.
I walked over, my presence filling the room.
Who gave you the clearance to touch my desk? Her face turned pale. VP Cole said, "You're being transferred to the archives, and all the clinical documents need to be handed over to him immediately." I pulled out my phone and turned on the video recording. Say that again into the camera. Include the part where you acknowledge accessing HIPAA-protected patient files without the PI's presence. She immediately clamped her mouth shut, terrified. At that moment, Ryan strolled out of the adjacent glass office. He had changed into a sharp, dark blue bespoke suit, his hair immaculately styled as if last night's humiliation had washed right off him. "Ethan, don't scare the young lady. I just asked her to organize the paperwork in advance so your handover doesn't delay our investor meetings."
I looked at him.
The FDA handover process requires the physical presence of 3 parties: the outgoing PI, the hospital's legal compliance officer, and an independent ethics board auditor. You had an uncredentialed assistant privately go through federally authorized medical documents, and you call that organizing in advance? Doctors and nurses in the surrounding cubicles all turned to look. Ryan's smile faded slightly.
You don't have to be so pedantic about the rules.
We're all working for the same hospital. I retrieved the dropped folders from the desk. There are my personal surgical notes and unauthorized hospital intellectual property inside. Touch my desk again, and I won't just report you to HR.
I'll report you to the Federal Medical Board for a HIPAA violation?
His face finally darkened into a scowl. "Ethan, don't push your luck." I opened my laptop and unplugged the encrypted hard drive containing my AI algorithms. You should have said that to yourself last night. At exactly 9 a.m., the ad hoc hospital board meeting began. Olivia sat at the head of the massive oak table, her face clearly showing a lack of sleep. Ryan was seated confidently on her right hand. When I walked in, the conference room fell silent. Chairman William Hart was also present. He is Olivia's father, a retired legendary surgeon, and the original founder of Aegis. In recent years, his health had failed, forcing him to step back. When he saw me, his thick white brows furrowed deeply. "Ethan, I've heard about the bonus discrepancy." I nodded respectfully to the old man. "Then that saves me from repeating the diagnosis." Olivia spoke up, her tone icy. "You're not here today to throw a temper tantrum, Dr.
Hayes, but to handle an administrative transition."
I ignored her tone and placed 3 thick document binders onto the center of the table.
First, the formal PI withdrawal notice.
According to my employment agreement and federal guidelines, I have the right to withdraw my medical license from this trial due to ethical concerns. Second, the notice of expiration of authorization for the state research lab and my AI monitoring software. Aegis failed to submit a renewal application on time and did not settle the licensing fees. Therefore, the IP usage rights are hereby revoked. Third, the official risk notification from Dr. Marcus Reed at the FDA regarding the sudden change of the principal investigator. The regulatory body has officially suspended all Phase 2 trials for Sequoia, Coastal, and Blue Ridge, pending a full investigation. With every sentence I spoke, the air pressure in the conference room seemed to drop. Mark Benson, the marketing director, slammed his hand on the table. "Hayes, you're maliciously choking the hospital's cash flow." I looked at him with clinical detachment. "Did I draft the expiration date in the contract last night?" He choked. I continued. "Did I force the hospital to miss the payment deadline?" He fell completely silent. The legal director frantically flipped through the binders, his expression growing increasingly horrified.
Chairman Hart.
The supplementary agreement does indeed state that if the software patent fees remain unpaid past the 90-day deadline, the patent holder has the unilateral right to refuse renewal. Olivia looked at me, her mask slipping. "How much is the overdue fee?" $3.72 million. Someone in the meeting room gasped audibly. Aegis could easily come up with this money. The problem was, Olivia and the board always assumed that because I was her husband, I would never actually collect on the debt. Olivia pressed her fingers to her temples. "Fine. The finance department will wire it today." I shook my head. Overdue settlement does not automatically restore renewal rights. That requires a new negotiation. And I declined to negotiate. She suddenly looked up, her composure shattering. "What exactly do you want, Ethan?"
I took out the 4th document.
"I want the clinical bonuses completely audited. I want the project medical credits legally corrected in the publications. And I want the $5 million bonus approved for Ryan Cole to be subjected to an independent financial and ethical review." Ryan could no longer sit still. He sprang up. "What is the meaning of this?"
"Are you accusing me of fraud?"
I looked at him.
Not suspicion, Ryan.
Confirmation. I took the projector remote and cast the hospital's secure backend logs provided by Grace onto the massive screen. The room darkened. and the glaring truth lit up their faces. The 3 revision records of the clinical bonus approval are crystal clear. First draft, Dr. Hayes is allocated $4.8 million for surgical milestones and patent usage. Second draft, reduced to $30,000. Third draft $1,000. Meanwhile, Ryan's $5 million sailed through with 0 revisions. The approval remarks state, core contributor to the Sequoia project. I clicked to the next slide, showing the hospital's electronic medical record EMR system logs. From project initiation to phase 2 acceptance, the Sequoia trial required 762 key clinical system entries. Operations, medication adjustments, emergency interventions.
My logged operations, 534 entries.
Ryan Cole's logged operations, 26 entries. Among those 26, 12 were simple views, 7 were email forwards, and the remaining 7 were uploads of promotional photographs taken in the sterile corridor. The meeting room was dead silent. You could hear the faint hum of the projector fan. I pointed a laser pointer at the screen.
So, this is the core contribution worth $5 million?
Ryan's face turned the color of ash. He stammered, System. System operations don't represent the entirety of commercial contributions.
Investor relations, strategic marketing judgments.
These aren't things simple EMR data can reflect. I clicked to the third page, Client and Regulatory Communication Record. The email from FDA Director Marcus Reed was displayed in massive font. Dr. Ethan Hayes, the Chief Medical Lead for the Aegis trials, is a crucial, non-negotiable prerequisite for our continued regulatory cooperation and fast-track approval.
I looked dead at Ryan.
Investor relations. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Olivia's voice tightened into a harsh whisper.
Where did you get these materials, Ethan?
You don't have permission to pull administrative audit logs.
I didn't pull them, I said calmly.
I turned the laptop screen toward the legal director. These logs were accessed legally through my own PI dashboard. Furthermore, these records directly involve disputes over my medical license and project contributions. I have the federal right to use them for internal appeals. The head of legal wiped sweat from his brow and nodded reluctantly. Procedurally, Dr. Hayes is within his rights. Ryan looked at Olivia, sheer panic finally breaking through his arrogant facade. Olivia realized in that moment that this couldn't be brushed off as a domestic quarrel over a bruised ego. This was a corporate execution. William Hart, who had remained silent like a dormant volcano, finally tapped his heavy cane against the table.
Olivia,
explain the bonus approval modifications.
Now, Olivia was silent for a few agonizing seconds. I believed Ethan's recent academic rigidity posed a management risk, making him unsuitable for commercial tier incentives. William's voice was dangerously low.
What is your clinical basis for that assessment?
She looked desperately at Ryan. Ryan immediately opened his leather portfolio. Here are records of Dr. Hayes' several critical errors during the Sequoia surgeries, including unauthorized adjustments of patient medication parameters, refusal to share trial data with the investors, and active suppression of my work as the new VP. I looked at the file he tossed on the table. Sure enough, he was trying to weaponize the medical error he caused against me. I waited until he finished his frantic explanation before I pressed play on a digital voice recorder. It was an audio file from June 17th.
After the Sequoia investor reception,
The conversation took place in the hospital scrub room.
Ryan's voice was unmistakable.
Ryan, Ethan, look, I spoke too quickly to the venture capitalists tonight. I promised them the patients would be walking by day 3. Help me cover for the early IV dosage increase.
Just adjust the monitors.
Don't tell the ethics board.
I just joined the company and I can't afford a medical malpractice mark on my record. Ethan, you don't have the medical authority to promise early recovery or order nurses to touch the IVs.
You nearly killed a man in bed 4.
I will stabilize him and add a medical risk addendum to save the trial. But your unauthorized interference goes into the official incident report tomorrow. Ryan's face instantly turned a sickly gray.
I turned off the recording.
First point, whose clinical error was it?
No one in the boardroom dared to answer. I opened the second document. Second point, it's not that I refuse to share patient data. Federal HIPAA law and the FDA contract explicitly forbid sharing raw, unblinded clinical data with non-medical commercial executives. If I had given Ryan the data to show his investors, the trial would be a federal crime. I opened the third document. Third point, the suppression of his work. The meeting minutes show I rejected Ryan's proposal to use cheaper, non-surgical grade silicon for the artificial valves, because it failed the peak load tolerance stress tests. I wasn't suppressing his career. I was preventing him from committing manslaughter on the operating table. 3 pieces of airtight, irrefutable evidence were laid out. Ryan slumped in his chair, unable to utter a single coherent syllable. Just then, a sharp knock came at the conference room door.
Grace pushed the door open, holding a freshly printed document with a red Origin stamp.
Chairman Hart, an official legal injunction has just arrived from the Coastal Oncology Center. Olivia snatched it from Grace's hand, her eyes scanning the text. Her expression shattered. Grace's voice was steady and loud enough for the room. The coastal authorities have formally requested an immediate suspension of the clinical contract renewal and demand an ethical explanation for the sudden removal of Dr. Hayes as the trial lead. I looked at Olivia, who was trembling slightly. The second symptom has arrived. The board meeting was forced into an emergency recess, not because the issues were resolved, but because the bleeding couldn't be stopped. Sequoia was paused. Coastal was suspended.
Blue Ridge was launching an inquiry.
The core patent authorization was revoked. The $5 million bonus was flagged for severe financial injustice, and Ryan's entire medical credibility was vaporized. Every piece of evidence was a surgical strike, dismantling their narrative. In the conference room, only Olivia, Ryan, William, Grace, and I remained. Once the heavy oak door clicked shut, Olivia's CEO composure completely disintegrated. "Ethan, are you satisfied now?" she shouted. I looked at her calmly. "I'm just presenting the medical facts." She let out a bitter, cold laugh. "You sure picked the perfect time to lay out the facts." The annual meeting ends, and 12 hours later, the FDA's letter arrives, the injunction lands, and the patent gets pulled on this exact day.
Are you really trying to tell me you didn't orchestrate this entire ambush in advance?
"Of course I prepared," I said, my voice steady. "From the moment you first forged my signature on the Sequoia quarterly report to give Ryan co-credit, I began preparing the antidote." She froze. Ryan immediately seized the opportunity to deflect.
"See, Chairman?
Has been wanting to sabotage the hospital all along. Has been planting landmines." I looked at him like I was examining a tumor.
What I planted was evidence.
If no one attempts to steal the clinical credit, the evidence remains a harmless file. If a parasite tries to steal the lifeblood of the project, the evidence becomes a landmine. Grace lowered her head, the corner of her mouth twitching in a suppressed smile. William looked at Olivia, his ancient eyes filled with profound disappointment. "What is this about forging his signature on the Sequoia report?" Olivia did not answer immediately.
Ryan blurted out, "Chairman, that was to maintain a unified commercial front."
As the VP of strategy, I am a better match for the high-level investor tiers than a surgeon. I asked him, "How many times have you actually met Dr.
Reed from the FDA?"
He froze. I answered for him. "Once." "And I was the one who dragged you there." At that single meeting, Ryan was 27 minutes late. When he finally arrived, he mispronounced the FDA director's surname and tried to hand him a marketing brochure instead of the clinical data sheet. The client's face immediately turned to stone. I had to spend an hour breaking down the surgical logistics and biocompatibility metrics just to salvage the hospital's reputation. I looked at Olivia. I didn't originally want to bring up these humiliating details. After all, it's unsightly for the hospital. But since you insist on treating his incompetence as a merit, I have no choice but to lay the corpse on the table for autopsy. Ryan was furious. His face flushed purple with embarrassment. "Ethan, don't be so damn arrogant." I was about to speak when a commotion erupted outside the meeting room. The IT director pushed the door open, looking completely flustered, sweat beading on his forehead. "CEO Hart, there is a critical lockout in the back end of the Sequoia EMR system." Olivia gripped the edge of the table.
"What now?"
The IT director glanced nervously at me. VP Cole asked his team to export all the proprietary surgical protocols and patient trial data to an external drive this morning, but the core solution library is locked. Ryan immediately snapped. "Impossible. I have executive deputy director level access." The IT director braced himself. "The back-end protocol dictates that the core IP library requires dual biometric confirmation from the original principal investigator to initiate a handover. Without Dr. Hayes' fingerprint, it cannot be accessed."
"By anyone."
Olivia whipped her head toward me. "Did you set this trap?" "It wasn't set by me," I said smoothly. "It was set by federal compliance. At the time of inception, the Sequoia project involved highly sensitive patient genetic data. The FDA required dual authorization for the core library. One layer of hospital corporate authority, one layer of PI medical authority. My resignation does not magically transfer ownership of patient data.
No FDA confirmation letter, no legal department presence, no ethical handover checklist.
No one is allowed to move a single megabyte. This is to protect the patients and the hospital from federal prosecution. Ryan's face twisted into a snarl.
Then confirm the damn handover right now.
I laughed softly. Are you giving a medical order to an attending surgeon? He gritted his teeth. Olivia stepped forward, her voice strained. Ethan, please. Unlock the permissions first. The trial cannot stop.
People's lives are on the line.
I looked at her.
Where is the ethical handover checklist?
She was silent.
Where is the FDA confirmation letter?
She remained silent. Where is the legal witness?
The legal director muttered from the corner.
I am not legally prepared to witness this. I shrugged. Then we follow the procedure. Ryan slammed his fist on the table.
You did this on purpose to extort us.
I met his gaze, my eyes cold.
When you pocketed the $5 million last night while mocking me in front of hundreds of people, why didn't you mention the procedure?
Grace suddenly spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. VP Cole, just a reminder, at 8:56 a.m. today, you had your assistant illegally attempt to search Dr. Hayes' physical workstation. At 9:23 a.m., you attempted to bypass the hospital's legal firewall to export classified Sequoia patient data to an unencrypted external drive. The back-end security logs caught everything. Ryan turned and glared at her. Grace, what exactly are you implying? Grace remained utterly calm. What I am stating as a fact is that if we are talking about federal rule violations, the person facing jail time right now isn't Dr. Hayes. The meeting room fell silent again, the kind of silence that precedes a flatline. Olivia lowered her voice, sounding exhausted. That's enough. She looked at me, a desperate plea in her eyes. What exactly will it take for you to cooperate with the handover? I pulled a crisp sheet of paper from my binder and slid it across the table. First, a full, independent audit of the bonus approvals and clinical milestones. Second, legally restore the original authorship records for all medical publications and project attributions. Third, Ryan Cole is to cease all contact with the Sequoia, Coastal, and Blue Ridge trials immediately, pending the audit.
Fourth, settle the $3.
$72 million in overdue patent maintenance fees by close of business today. The IP renewal itself will be discussed separately. Fifth, issue a public, hospital-wide correction regarding the erroneous statement about my contributions made at last night's gala. Every single demand landed on her like a physical blow. Olivia's gaze turned ice cold. You want me, the CEO, to publicly admit to the entire medical network that I lied? I want the hospital to publicly acknowledge the medical facts I corrected. Ryan sneered, trying to regain his footing. Don't kid yourself, Hayes. There is no way Olivia is going to publicly humiliate herself just to appease a disgruntled ex-employee. I looked at him. Then let's see what the FDA thinks. As soon as I finished speaking, Olivia's phone rang loudly. The caller ID flashed on the screen.
Doctor.
Marcus Reed, FDA. She hesitated, then answered and put it on speaker.
Doctor.
Reed?
Reed's voice was sharp and uncompromising.
Ms.
Hart, we've received a severe system monitoring alert that Aegis personnel are attempting to bypass the principal investigator to mass export the Sequoia Core Solution Library. Are you experiencing a data breach? Olivia's face stiffened. It's an internal misunderstanding, Director. The FDA does not deal in misunderstandings, Reed said coldly. Have Aegis submit a formal written explanation within 24 hours. Otherwise, your hospital's qualification for the Phase 2 bidding will be permanently revoked. Ryan's face turned a sickening shade of green. Reed continued. Additionally, the board only recognizes Dr. Ethan Hayes as the person authorized to explain the clinical handover of Phase I. No corporate executive is qualified to interpret the surgical roadmap. Put him back in charge, or the trial is dead. I stood by, saying nothing. Olivia tightened her grip on her phone.
Doctor
Hayes has already applied for a transfer, Director. Reed scoffed. That is your internal management failure. If Aegis can't retain a world-class surgeon and key investigator, then bear the consequences of your incompetence. The call ended. William Hart suddenly stood up, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked at Olivia, his voice vibrating with absolute authority. Immediately suspend all of Ryan Cole's executive permissions and hospital access. Ryan snapped his head up in shock. Chairman. Olivia panicked. Dad, if we suspend Ryan right now, what will the investors think? It looks like an admission of guilt. William looked at his daughter with a gaze that could freeze boiling water. Rather than worrying about what the venture capitalists think, you should start worrying about what the federal government thinks. He then turned to me. Ethan, I agree to the independent audit. All your terms are met, but for the sake of the patients currently in the trial, you need to ensure the hospital doesn't breach the federal contract due to these. Process issues. I nodded. As long as everything proceeds according to the law and my terms, I will ensure patient safety is not compromised. Olivia looked at me. The look in her eyes was incredibly complex. There was anger, there was panic, and also a deep, terrifying hint of regret. She was unwilling to admit defeat, but she knew she was trapped. But that wasn't enough.
The real reckoning had yet to begin.
But before the meeting ended, Grace suddenly handed a fresh, sealed folder to William. Chairman Hart. There is one more matter compliance uncovered this morning. Ryan immediately became hyper-alert, like a cornered rat.
What else are you making up?
Grace didn't even blink at him. After VP Cole's $5 million bonus was deposited at 10 last night, $2 million was immediately wire transferred to an external medical logistics consulting firm. She placed the bank logs on the table. The legal representative and sole proprietor of that shell company is his cousin. Ryan's face instantly lost all color, turning a dead, waxy white. Olivia snapped her gaze toward him, true horror dawning on her face.
Embezzlement.
I picked up my coat from the back of the chair.
Excellent work, Grace.
The first domino had crushed them. And it was only the beginning. At 2000 p.m., the hospital held an emergency network-wide project review meeting. The venue was changed from the boardroom to the main surgical lecture hall because the situation could no longer be contained. The news that Sequoia and Coastal had been suspended by the FDA and the patent authorization revoked had spread like a virus throughout the entire Aegis network. Those who had laughed at me last night, whispering that I was only worth $1,000, now looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. The lecture hall was packed with hundreds of senior medical staff and administrators. The front row was the board of directors. Ryan sat on the far right, guarded by 2 hospital security officers, his face dark and sweating. Olivia sat in the center seat, refusing to look in my direction. She had changed into a stark white blouse and black trousers, a desperate attempt to look like a serious executive, but her fingers kept tapping erratically on the armrest. It was her tell when she was losing control. As the meeting began, William took the microphone. Today, we are conducting a transparent review of the clinical contributions, attribution ethics, and financial disbursements for the Sequoia trial. As soon as these words echoed through the hall, a pin drop could be heard. I stepped up to the podium.
I didn't bring speech notes.
I simply plugged a USB drive into the lectern. The first slide on the massive screen was the timeline of the Sequoia surgical project. From the initial FDA requirements meeting, to the finalization of the surgical protocol, to the grueling 36-hour animal testing phases, to the first human trial, to the $41 million grant award. Every single milestone was backed by timestamps, emails, surgical logs, and FDA correspondence. I did not exaggerate. I did not raise my voice. I simply performed a clinical dissection of the truth. On March 7th, Sequoia's first requirement meeting. Attendees, Dr. Ethan Hayes, Technical Lead. Daniel Brooks, FDA Director Marcus Reed. On March 19th, the first protocol was rejected due to valve stress failure. I led the surgical team to redesign the implantation technique over 72 straight hours. On April 26th, Ryan Cole joined the hospital administration. On May 3rd, Ryan attended his first internal meeting. The clinical cost estimate he proposed had a fatal error of 180%, failing to account for post-op immunosuppressants. On May 16th, Ryan made an unauthorized, illegal commitment to early patient discharge at an investor reception, instructing nurses to alter IV flow rates. The next morning, I performed emergency surgery to save the patient's life and submitted a risk addendum to the ethics board to prevent an investigation. Every time I read out an item, the giant screen flashed the irrefutable evidence: emails, audio waveforms, system logs, contract signatures. The auditorium was deadly silent. Mark Benson sat in the second row, his face growing paler and paler, because last night he had publicly mocked me for running the wards. And now the screen was proving to everyone that the man running the wards was the only reason any of them still had jobs. I clicked to the second part, the bonus calculation. The original matrix showed my surgical and patent compensation at $8 million. The second version, altered by CEO Hart, reduced it to $2 million
with the note, considering executive balance.
The third version reduced it to $30,000. Final version, $1,000. The note reads, clinical style too strong, not suitable for motivation. A senior cardiac surgeon in the audience finally muttered a curse under his breath.
That is absolutely disgusting.
Olivia's face turned to stone.
I looked down at her from the podium.
CEO Hart, you were the sole approver. I'd like to ask you, in front of the entire medical staff, What is the clinical basis for claiming that a surgeon's style is too strong when patient survival is at 96%? All eyes bored into her. She was silent for an agonizing moment.
At the time.
I took the executive team's feedback into consideration. I clicked to the next page. Let's review that feedback. First, Mark Benson.
Mark's email appeared.
He complained that I was hogging medical resources and refusing to let marketing film patients while they were under anesthesia for promotional videos. I opened the attachment, my reply. Patient dignity and HIPAA laws are not marketing tools. Mark buried his face in his hands. Second, Ryan Cole. The audio recording of him begging me to cover up his near-fatal 5-eye adjustment played again, this time echoing through the massive hall. Ryan abruptly stood up, shouting, "Ethan Hayes, recording without consent in the hospital is an invasion of privacy." I looked calmly at the legal director in the front row. The director cleared his throat into his mic. The recording involves the explanation of a critical medical error and took place in a non-patient administrative setting. It does not constitute illegal evidence gathering.
I continued.
Third, the HR director. The screen showed an evaluation dated 7:20 p.m. last night. Dr. Hayes has shown a clear tendency to resign, posing a high risk to team stability. I looked at the HR director. This evaluation was logged at 7:20 p.m., but I didn't submit my resignation until 8:40 p.m. during the banquet. May I ask how HR developed clairvoyance? The HR director stammered, sweating profusely. It was VP Cole who reminded me to preemptively flag your file. I turned off the projector. The screen went black. The so-called team feedback was nothing but a pre-designed conspiracy to suppress the achievements of the surgical team and funnel the grant money to a man who nearly killed a trial patient. I took my original resignation letter and held it up. I only have one question for Aegis Healthcare today. If a surgeon who shoulders 87% of the clinical success and holds the hospital's reputation together with his bare hands is only worth $1,000 and a demotion to the morgue, then what reason does any doctor or nurse in this room have to give their all for this administration? When these words fell, a heavy resonant silence gripped the auditorium. I could see the fire igniting in the eyes of the veteran doctors and exhausted residents. They knew that if the chief investigator could be slaughtered like this today, tomorrow it would be their turn. Olivia finally spoke into her microphone, her voice trembling. "Ethan, the hospital will conduct a full financial re-audit." I looked at her.
Just a re-audit?
Her voice tightened. "Bonuses will be recalculated and restored."
What else?
I demanded.
Where is the clinical project signature?
She clenched her fingers.
We will restore the original records.
And the public humiliation at last night's gala?
Her face turned pale. Ryan hissed from the side. "Olivia, you can't." Olivia suddenly snapped her head toward him, her eyes blazing with rage.
Shut up.
It was the first time she had ever spoken to him like that in public. Ryan recoiled, as if struck. I watched the scene unfold from the podium. I felt no satisfaction, only a profound, delayed sense of absurdity. She wasn't unaware that he was incompetent. She just didn't care, until his incompetence threatened her empire and her money. William stood up. "The board hereby issues an immediate network-wide correction. The sole chief investigator for the Sequoia project is Dr. Ethan Hayes. All bonus approvals are voided and will be reissued after the federal audit. Ryan Cole is terminated effective immediately and will be handed over to the authorities for investigation regarding the $2 million kickback." The lecture hall erupted.
Ryan screamed, fighting against the security guards grabbing his arms.
"Chairman, this is unfair. Olivia told me to do it. She wanted him out. William didn't even look at him. Save it for the federal prosecutor. Remove him." I packed up my laptop, ready to leave. Olivia suddenly called out, her voice breaking, "Ethan." I turned around. She was standing at the base of the stage, looking up at me.
Don't leave yet.
We need to talk.
Everyone was watching us.
I took a sleek manila envelope out of my bag, walked down the steps and placed it in her hands. Perfect timing.
I have a prescription for you too.
She looked down at the document. Her face instantly turned a chalky, bloodless white. It was a divorce agreement. Now that the hospital's accounts are settled, I said quietly, "It's time to settle the marriage." Ryan, being dragged toward the exit, burst into manic laughter.
Hess dumping you.
Hess actually dumping you.
Olivia looked up at me, real, unadulterated terror in her eyes.
Are you divorcing me?
I picked up my coat and turned to the exit.
No.
I've already divorced you in my mind.
This is just the paperwork catching up. Half a month later, 3 things happened simultaneously. First, Ryan Cole was indicted for corporate fraud and embezzlement. The $2 million was traced to his cousin's shell company. Because he attempted to alter FDA records to cover his tracks, he was also facing federal tampering charges. Second, Aegis Healthcare was forced to undergo a brutal restructuring. To keep the FDA from shutting them down, the board fired Olivia as CEO. William had to come out of retirement to beg the regulatory bodies for mercy.
My $4.
$8 million bonus, the $1, $2 million in deferred compensation, and the $3, $7 million in patent licensing fees were all forcibly liquidated and transferred to my accounts to avoid a massive lawsuit. Third, the divorce case was finalized. She had refused to sign at first. It wasn't until the day the court summons arrived that she finally agreed to mediation at my lawyer's office. When I arrived, she was already sitting there, dressed in a simple blouse, looking exhausted and hollow. When it came time to divide the assets, my lawyer brought up the house I had mortgaged 6 years ago to save her clinic. Olivia finally broke. Tears spilled over her cheeks.
The Sequoia patent.
The lab access. It was all your connections. Letting Aegis use it for pennies was your way of helping me build my dream. Over the years, I forgot how much you bled for me. I thought that between husband and wife there was no need to keep score. I looked at her.
I used to think that way too.
But you were keeping a very detailed score, Olivia. You just made sure mine always read 0. She sobbed, a pathetic broken sound. I'm sorry, Ethan. I am so sorry.
I didn't hand her a tissue.
I just pushed the pen across the table.
Sign.
Her fingers trembled violently as she picked it up. If it weren't for Ryan, if I hadn't messed with the bonus,
Would we have stayed together?
No, I said flatly.
Ryan was just the symptom. The disease was that you took my sacrifices for granted.
You didn't hurt me because he asked you to.
You hurt me because you felt entitled to?
She froze completely, the truth hitting her harder than the divorce papers. She signed her name, her tears staining the ink. A year later, at the National Medical Technology Summit, I stood on the grand stage as the founder and lead surgeon of my own independent research institute. The new Sequoia Phase 3 trial had launched smoothly under my new company. We poached the best talent from Aegis. When FDA Director Marcus Reed came to cut the ribbon at my new facility, he smiled and pointed to a framed $1000 check hanging on my office wall. Remind me not to cross you, Ethan. It's just a reminder. I had laughed, to never become the people we despise. Now looking out at the summit audience, I saw William Hart in the front row, looking incredibly frail. Grace was there too, now my chief compliance officer. And in the very back row, dressed plainly, sat Olivia.
Quietly watching me.
When the host introduced me, the applause was thunderous. I stood under the bright lights, not borrowing anyone's name, not relying on anyone's charity. I leaned into the microphone. Many people ask me what is the most important thing in pioneering medical research. The massive hall fell silent. It's not funding, it's not cutting-edge tech. It's boundaries. You need to know what is yours and what is not. If someone takes your life's work, you excise them like a tumor. If someone gives you their trust, you guard it with your life.
And if you love someone...
I paused, my eyes drifting to the shadows in the back row. You never let them use that love to drain your dignity. The applause roared, a standing ovation from the brightest minds in the country. I saw Olivia lower her head, wipe her eyes, and slip out the back door before the lights came up. Walking out of the venue later that evening, the city lights were brilliant.
My phone buzzed.
A text from an unknown number.
If I hadn't treated your love as my fallback plan...
Would I still be standing beside you? I stared at the screen for 2 seconds. Then I deleted the message, blocked the number, and stepped into the warm night air. Some tumors are benign.
Some are malignant.
But once you cut them out, you never put them back in.